Hello quilt friends, welcome back to the Rose Garden Sew Along. We are on week 7, and if you are making the runner from our Sew Along, you are going to get to finish your runner this week. So if you're doing that pattern, you are going to be doing step 22 through step 30, and I have prepared a couple of videos that I will walk you through that. They will come next. And if you're doing the big quilt, we are going to start assembling some of these background and some of the rose sections. So we are going to be starting with step 28 and going through step 32 in our pattern. So I've got a lot of hints for you, and just we'll walk you through some of those steps. So we're going to do the runner parts first. So, because that won't take as long. So I'm going to walk through how to do the single and the double rose runner, and then I will walk you through how to do these sections for the big quilt. All right, so I've got some of my blocks all set out. Now I don't have a good tripod for holding my camera for this because I do not have a film studio, as you already know, just from watching my videos, and that they are not professionally done. So I'm going to try to hold the camera still enough that I can talk to you about the assembly on the runners first. So the first one we're going to talk about is the single rose runner. So that's this one on your pattern. So you can see I have the big rose block laid out. And we already made these leaf units, so you can go ahead and sew those to either side of the rose, and that will become the middle section of the runner. Then our next step is to sew the background pieces to our teal flowers. Now my only hint about this is that these are directional, so watch out for the positioning of the green leaves, and that there's the skinny strip on this side for this one, and over here you're going to make a mirror image like this. And once you have those sewn together, so like here I don't have it quite sewn, you can see that'll be sewn like the wider one there and the skinny one here, and then once those are sewn together, there's a large cream rectangle here that will be sewn like this. Now you can see it's not the full width because I didn't want to waste quite that much fabric, so make sure you line it up along the inside of the quilt because we need a straight line here to sew to our stem unit. Now our stem unit, you're going to add a little strip on the end. And once that's done, then this length here will match this length here. I'm going to switch hands here, and you'll be sewing that one. And then you can go ahead and sew these two long seams, and then that width will now be the width of this center section. So you can go ahead and sew all of those together, and you'll make another one on the opposite end up here. I am out of table space here. But that's what the assembly is like for the single rose runner. It's very simple at this point. One thing I do want to point out is in the final pattern, you can see that this is angled here. So I show in the pattern how you draw a diagonal line across there. And I would wait to cut that until after the runner is quilted. And that way you aren't dealing with that long, skinny bias edge, and you don't have to worry about it stretching out or ruffling up on you. So you can go ahead and just mark that line and leave that for your quilter, or if you're quilting it yourself, again, just don't deal with that bias edge now. Get it all stitched together, the machine quilting or however you're finishing it done, and then you can trim on that line and then do the binding. All right, now we're going to work on the double rose runner layout. That's this one, as you can see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those leaf units that we've already made, sew them to the rose block like so. Now you have another leaf unit here, and then we've sewn a couple background pieces to the edge of our flower block. Now again, that block is directional, so watch the direction of that. You'll sew those two together and then sew it to the rose block, and you will have one big block that looks like this. Now we're going to need 2 of those, but just notice that this one, the flower is going the opposite direction. So one like that, one like this. And you'll make one of each of those, and then you're going to sew the middle section together. So again, the pattern will tell you which background section or piece to sew to your flower, and then you'll connect this all in a big long row like so, and then it will be the same width as our rose block here, and then you'll sew all 3 of those together. I'm going to go do that now, and then I'll be back with the next section. Okay, so I have my runner sewn into 3 sections like so. The only thing to watch out for is, again, to pay attention to the way you lay your center section in, because if you tip it, then the leaves won't be scattered like every other direction like I have them here. So just pay attention to that while you're doing that. And the only other hint I have is maybe to plan a little bit your placement for your border squares. I've got them sewn together end to end, but like you see this one, I have the same print here and here, so I will flip that around. And like on this one, this navy would have ended up next to the navy over here if I hadn't have turned it the way that it is. So I just watch for that placement a little bit. There are cut sizes for the borders in your pattern, but you'll want to measure through the center of your own runner first to make sure that that's accurate. So that's all there is to it. If you are doing any of the table runners for the sew along, you are now complete. And you can tune in again on the last session if you want to hear a little bit about some finishing like machine quilting or binding, but otherwise you are complete and finished. Okay, I'm all set up for those of you who are doing the big quilt. We're going to begin on step 28, and we are making this unit right here. And we're going to make 3 of these. They're all going to be exactly alike. So there are little sections you sew together. There's a little strip here, then your flower block, then a rectangle here. And if you remember back from when we cut the quilt, we labeled all these pieces with what size or what step they are for. So you should have a little pile of pieces that are ready for step 28. And then there's a listing of the actual size pieces as well in your pattern. So you can refer to either of those to get those pieces ready to assemble. And then just my only hint is when you're making, like when you're sewing this strip on either side of the flower, just pay attention to what direction the flower is going, that you have the green in these corners here and the same here. So after you sew this section together, there'll be a strip in between here, then there'll be a rectangle that goes to this one and another strip that you sew up at the top to make this long unit here. Now this should measure 10 inches by 20 inches, so you can proof that before you go on to the next step. And then you will be moving to step 29, where you will take that section and you're going to sew it to this leaf unit like this. And then we're going to make a section that goes on this side. So let me pull that over into the camera view. I've got all of these pieces right here. So these 2 go here. Then we have a big rectangle. And then we have these pieces here. I need to move this to get this further into the camera. So again, you'll have a little rectangle that you can sew to the flower and to this little bit bigger rectangle. Again, watch for the placement of where the green is. Then you can sew those 3 pieces together. Then you can add them to this big rectangle up here. Then we need to connect these 2 pieces. So my hint for you on this is that these triangles are cut exactly to size. They aren't oversized, so when you lay these 2 pieces together, this will line up perfectly along this edge. See, our triangle and rectangle line up here. And then on this end, there's going to be that little tip hanging out of the end. Just like last week when we talked about lining up the valley with the intersection, we're going to have a valley here, and that's going to line up. If it's, hanging way out, then you know that your piecing is off, and in this case, this is a solid rectangle. But as we go forward, you'll know that your piece is off if these triangles don't perfectly fit the piece that I have you sewing them to. So at this point, they'll fit, but you're going to sew those 2 together. And after you do, then you're going to sew this section to here. So just as you're going along, just make sure you keep the bias to the bottom and make those triangles fit to make that section. And then you'll be able to sew it to the leaf section and the flower section that you just made. And you will have one big unit like that. That will look like this. So you can follow the pressing arrows as you go. And then I show little join symbols here that show you at what stage you join which pieces. So you're going to make one of those, and then I'm going to walk you through how to make the second one. Okay, now I have step 30 laid out. So you're going to want to grab all the different background pieces that you need for step 30, which are basically just the pieces I have laying to the left. You've already made this unit, you've already made this unit, so you can go ahead and sew those together, and you will make 2 of those. Then we'll make this section over here. Again, you're just going to be sewing these rectangles together as shown in the picture. Watch for the placement of the green leaves. After you sew these 3 pieces together, you can add this piece. So you've got a little section like that. Then we're going to sew these bias triangles together to make this unit. So lay these right sides together. Again, keep the straight of grain on top, and the navy triangle is cut to fit. So let me get this in the camera. That's what you're going to sew together. You can see the little tip that's hanging above here, and that these corners are all lined up down here. After you sew that, then this piece will fit to the top. So bring that to the machine, and I'm going to show you a close-up of that corner because I have one already sewn together here. So you're going to sew this triangle to the top of this unit, again keeping that bias to the bottom, and after you sew it together, do you see how there is a 1/4 inch seam line from the point of the navy rectangle to the edge of these two triangles? It's a little dark here, but hopefully you can see that seam line there. And that's how you know you did that sewing correctly, because you have a nice straight line along this edge. So let me lay that out for you. This is the unit that you will have just made. So here's that nice straight line that I was talking about after you join these two rectangles. And because they are cut exactly to size, and if you get them lined up correctly, that's how you get that nice straight line. And you can just leave this angle for now. This will get trimmed later after we put it together, but the reason I don't have you trim it now is then that bias edge won't stretch out as you're working on it. So now I'm going to prepare for step 31, so I'll get my roses and those pieces set out. Okay, I'm all set up and ready to go for step 31. No bias triangles in these sections. We're going to be sewing the leaves together with the rose blocks and a couple of our teal flowers again. So we've already made our roses in these units, so you can go and sew those together like so to make that strip. And then before we can make this strip, we have a couple of little navy rectangles to sew to our teal flower. So you're going to sew one on this side, one on this side, watch the placement of the green, and then you will sew these together in a row, and then you'll be able to connect across there. So that is step 31. That's the first part, this top section here. The bottom section we're going to make 2, and the only difference is instead of using this square, we're going to use triangle G. And again, this is cut to size, and you've already learned how to sew those together. So you're going to make that strip sew to the rose block just like you did the previous step here. And we're going to make 2 of these. One tip that I do want to share with you is that the one that you make like this, that square in the bottom corners, that will later be labeled as rose B. And then on the bottom of step 31, these 2 units that you make, which is this, those are going to be rose blocks A and C. And the reason I mention this now is because if you want to have certain color placements in certain locations on your finished quilt, you're going to want to know what's going to be where. So if you want to screenshot this, you can, but rose block A will go here, B will go here, and rose block C will go here. So just keep that in mind when you're making these sections here. Again, this top one is rose block B. The bottom 2 that you're making here will be A and C. Then you're going to go on to step 32, and these blocks are going to be huge, so it's really hard for me to get my camera pulled back far enough to show you. But you're going to be taking those leaf units that we just made on the previous page, step 29 and 30, and you're going to be sewing them together with the roses. So you can see down here, this is labeled rose block A and B and C. So you know where each of those roses will go. Then look at the top section, and you can see this corner here is the same as this corner here on your leaf unit, but this one is slightly different. So just make sure you attach the correct leaf stem with the correct rose that you want in those certain positions. So yeah, just pay very close attention to those diagrams, and you will be good. So that's a wrap on our sewing for this week. I hope you will join us again next week, where we will be making these 3 gold flowers. So those will be kind of a nice break after putting together all of these big units and all these multiple different sizes of pieces. We're going to be just doing some folded corners and making the roses. So happy sewing this week, and we'll see you back here again next Thursday.